Fallout London gets its first major update. The Hi-Fi Rush devs get saved from an unjust death, and why it may be the end of those silly Steam reviews. I'm Ash Dixon, and this is Ginx News. It was just 2 weeks ago that Fallout London exploded onto the scene, and considering how deprived we are of a new Fallout game, it was rather unsurprising how many of us quickly whipped out our attaboys and chugged on some Ion Brew. The truth is, 500,000 people downloaded the mod in just 24 hours, a record for GOG's 16-year history. Let's be honest, it did have an unbelievable amount of hype, but with hype comes pressure, and here's the thing, Team Folon delivered. Now don't get me wrong, it ain't perfect, there is bugs, so many bugs, but they had done the hard part. They had made a fantastic Fallout experience, which, dare I say, was Bethesda quality. Well, the first major update for Fallout London is here, and whew, look at that long list of bugs that have been fixed. It's no surprise considering how many of the quests had issues, though I'm not too happy that I can no longer get infinite pizza. It's not just quests though, as you'll no longer get repeatedly butchered by those goddamn foxes. What is up with those? You know that viral song about what does the fox say? Well, apparently it says, you'll also take less rad damage while swimming in the game's water. Now, don't get me wrong, even without radiation, the Thames is a deadly place. But even then, 250 rads a second felt rather high. It's now been lowered to 169, so you'll still be embodying the soul of an Olympic swimmer in Paris, but it's not quite an instant death sentence. Ultimately, I think a lot of people were sitting on this waiting for Team Folon to work out the kinks, and with this first major update, it's probably a good time to jump in. I'd love to know your thoughts if you've given it a go. Do you think Bethesda could learn anything from it? Do let us know your thoughts down in the comments. We've got yet another story about a beloved developer that's in the news. But for once, it's actually good news. That's right, Tango Gameworks has been saved. The developers of Hi-Fi Rush and The Evil Within have been picked up after Microsoft shut them down earlier in the year, in perhaps their most bizarrely stupid decision since removing that sexy little paperclip from Word. Now, before you take to the streets and pop the champagne, the saviors are Krafton, a publisher with not exactly the best reputation. Only the other day, the creator of the Callisto Protocol blamed the publisher for the poor reception the game received. Then there's the fact that most of Krafton's work involves microtransaction-fueled mobile tats, and the relationship between Krafton's biggest game, PUBG, and its creator is infamously tumultuous. But beggars can't be choosers, and maybe this decision is the beginning of a redemption arc. The shock and dismay when it was announced that Tango Gameworks was shutting down was immense. It's still staggering that Microsoft were basically happy to get rid of the studio that made their best game of last year, and abandoned one of gaming's most important creators in Shinji Mikami. He made Resident Evil, for God's sake. Why would you let him go? But their loss is Krafton's gain. On announcing the acquisition, they said they'll be focusing on continuing the development of the Hi-Fi Rush IP, as well as exploring future unnamed projects. So, hell yeah, more Hi-Fi Rush, and fingers crossed something new from Mikami too. Steam is testing out a new system that essentially hides all those silly reviews. Now, I actually think Steam reviews are quite helpful when you add them all up, not as a barometer of how good a game is, but just how angry the player base is. And the beauty is, for most Steam reviewers, all that matters is communicating that discontent in the stupidest way possible. Let's take Overwatch 2, for example. People love on that game. So let's have a look at what Steam claims to be the most helpful review in the past 30 days. It's like watching your beloved child slowly grow into a drug addict with no future. Harsh, but surprisingly on topic for Steam. Oh wait, there's more. Nobody will read my review, so I will eat 1 tablespoon of ketchup for every like this gets. Yeah, there we go. In fact, of the nearly 300,000 reviews, is essentially all just people celebrating NSFW artists, pasting ASCII memes, or sharing recipes for Black Forest cakes. But those silly Steam reviews might be a thing of the past. Valve briefly activated a helpfulness system that censored the ones it deemed too silly, before it was then taken offline, making people think that Valve are testing out the system. We don't quite know what their end game intention is here, but it's bold of them to think that Steam reviews could ever be an insightful place to visit. Speaking of places to visit, we have a 7-day free trial on our Patreon, Ginx Plus, running right now, so you can support the show, get exclusive content, and to be honest, nobody listens to these plugs, so I will eat 1 tablespoon of ketchup for every new person who signs up via this video. It's time for the quickfire round. First up, Geralt will not be the star of The Witcher 4. That's according to his voice actor, Doug Cockle. He did a little interview recently where he said, Geralt will be part of the game, we just don't know how much, and the game won't focus on Geralt, so it's not about him this time. He hasn't seen the script yet, but back in December, he predicted that Ciri will be taking over as the leading lady. Moving on, Valve's new game Deadlock may be gaming's worst kept secret. It's peaked so far at over 12,000 concurrent players on Steam, despite not even being announced yet. That's thanks to a rather massive closed beta going on right now. Obviously, those players will be under an NDA, but we have seen footage leaked of the 6v6, 4-lane, third-person, MOBA shooter, hybrid thing. I've kind of given up with genres at this point. But yeah, rather hilarious numbers when you compare it to the open beta of Concord. Last up, Final Fantasy VII has been fully remade in Little Big Planet 2. Made by just one man, the passion project took over 3.5 years to make. In fact, the creator, Jamie Colliver, is now petitioning to get it added as a minigame in Part 3 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy. And considering it's all under the Sony wing, I'm all for it. And that's the show! Shout out to everyone on Reddit who checked out our Borderlands review over the weekend. That birthed possibly my favorite comment of all time. Do subscribe if you haven't done so already, and we'll see you here on Wednesday.